Well, hey biology, hope you're doing well when you watch this video. Today we're going to be talking about angiosperms and how they are dominating the flower plant kingdom, and how when you think of a plant, you probably think of an angiosperm. And so we're going to talk about their structure and kind of some of the adaptations they have uh, been created with, if you believe in creation, or how God designed them to, within a kind to develop all these adaptations. But angiosperms. But here's the largest flower on the planet, and no, that's not me. Quick glance, people are like, "Hey, that's you." I'm like, "No, that's not." But it's found in Indonesia. It's called Rafflesia arnoldi, I believe, and it's actually a parasite. It actually doesn't have a root or stem system. It can grow up to 3 feet wide, but if you were to go near this flower, you would probably want to hold your breath because it smells like rotting meat, decaying flesh. And it does that because it's trying to attract insects. But that's the largest flower on the planet. But when you think of plants, you probably think of angiosperms. Angiosperms, literally more than 260,000 species of flowering plants are angiosperms. Almost, listen to this fact, almost all the food eaten by humans comes from angiosperms or from animals that eat angiosperms. So if I talked about gymnosperms, remember gymnosperms mean naked seed. Angiosperm actually means enclosed seed. They bear seeds in flowers within protective tissue. So it literally means enclosed seed. Ovaries surround and protect the seed, mature ovaries. After fertilization occurs, ovaries, mature into fruits, and a fruit is a structure containing one or more matured ovaries. So I'm going to give you some pictures from your book in this uh, lesson, video lesson. Here's one picture. So here's a cladogram. Okay, ancestral angiosperm wasn't a monocot or a dicot. This, of course, according to evolution as far as generally. But again, if you believe in kinds and you believe angiosperm was a kind in creation, this Christians wouldn't necessarily have an issue with this. But the people who work with plants, including farmers, botanists, and foresters, categorize angiosperm according to a variety of characteristics. What did they do? To the number of their seed leaves, cotyledons, the strength and composition of their stems, woody or herbaceous, and the number of growing seasons they live, perennial, biennial, or annuals, which I'll talk more about right now. So monocots versus dicots. Mono means one, di means two. So they usually just be defined like two, single or two. These are plant, seed leaves inside of a seed to help the plant grow when it's sprouting and germinating. Monocots have parallel veins, and dicots have branch veins. You can see there's a maple leaf. Flower parts are multiples of 3, 4, or 5 in dicots. Vascular bundles are arranged in a ring. Stems are arranged like bundled, scattered, no rhyme or reason. And then if you've ever pulled weeds or anything, most weeds are angiosperms. They produce flowers and stuff. Look to see what type of root they have. Is it fibrous, or is it one main root and like little small hairs branching off that root, which would be taproot? Okay, so the next time you're pulling leaves, pull some biology into it. Questions part one. I want you to research 2 monocots and 2 dicots that are native to Central Florida. Okay, so there's types of stems, herbaceous versus woody stems. Herbaceous, of course, green. Woody has secondary growth. We're not going to get into the specifics of that, but of course they have different chemical compounds to make that bark that you know is of course a lot different than a herbaceous leaf. And also, flowering plants have different growing cycles. Some are perennials, which grow year after year. Biennials have a 2-year growth cycle, and annuals have a 1-year growth cycle. When I buy plants for my yard, which I don't buy much of because I don't have extra money to spend raising little daughters, but when I do, I like to try to buy stuff and plant them with my oldest daughter. But I only buy perennials because I'm like, man, annuals literally die, and that's wasting money. And so they're beautiful, but I just, perennials. I need the perennials. So flowers. Mother's Day just happened. I, hope your mom or grandmother or aunt and all of them had a great Mother's Day. This is my favorite flower, the hibiscus flower, um, just because it was at my parents' house growing up, and every time I drove into the driveway or shot basketballs outside, I would see it. Just great memories. But flowers have a purpose. They're not only beautiful, but they have a purpose, okay? And they have an organization too. So let's go through the organization of a flower. Sepals and petals. Well, the outermost circle of floral parts contains sepals. So here's some examples of a sepal. Sepal encloses the bud before it opens. So if you have a lot of buds on a plant, it's about to like bloom and have all these beautiful flowers. And they protect the flower when it's developing. Petals, which of course is where the color comes from, are often brightly colored. But why is that? from a biology standpoint, is to attract, insects, pollinators to the flower. Sometimes a plant, because bees have different eyesights and some insects can see UV light, flowers look a lot different to animals than as insects than they do to us. Now stamens, hence the word men, are the male parts of the flower. Each stamen consists of a stalk called a filament and an anther. Anthers right here, anthers are the structures when pollen grains, gametophytes, are produced. We live in Florida and it's constantly growing season, so I'm sure some of y'all deal with allergies and you've seen all the pollen covering cars, when oaks are, releasing all that pollen and stuff. But that comes from anthers on a flower. Carpels, on the other hand, are the female parts of the flower. So each carpel has a broad base forming an ovary, which contains one or more ovules, where the female gametophytes are produced. So here's just another picture here, carpels, right? So a carpel narrows into a stalk called the style. Okay, so these are some terms you need to know. At the top of style, it's a sticky portion known as the stigma, sticky stigma. And so why is it sticky? To capture pollen. Because pollen is the male gametophyte, the stigma is part of the female gametophyte, and so when you want to catch that, the flowers want to catch that pollen to allow it to develop, like, deposit that sperm inside the ovary. So botanists sometimes call a single carpel self-fused carpels a pistil. So flowers come in many different sizes and shapes and colors. Here's a passion flower, that's really unique. Various different flowers, but there's a lot of advantages to flowers. Flowers attract pollinators. They're more efficient than relying on wind. After pollination, the ovary develops into a fruit which protects the seed. While the fruit helps distribute the seeds, either animals eat it and goes to the digestive system and is deposited far away from the mother plant with a rich nitrogen source of fertilizer with it, and so it definitely increases their range. The Amoeba Sisters have wonderful, y'all know I love the Amoeba Sisters. The Amoeba Sisters have wonderful videos about this. So question part 2, why would it be an advantage for a plant to have many flowers clustered in a single structure? And then part 2 of questions part 2, that made sense. For most angiosperms, the male and female parts of a flower are on the same flower, but not for all. Some species have male flowers and female flowers, specifically. So research such a species and tell me, where is it found? Describe its reproductive cycle, and do humans use the plant for any resource? So here's a reproductive cycle, just a general one for a plant, angiosperm. So you can see the male, meiosis, produces the, pollen spores. They divide to, larger, cells. These are 2 cells are called the male gametophytes. Inside the ovule, a single diploid cell undergoes meiosis, producing 4 haploid cells. The remaining cell undergoes mitosis, producing 8 nuclei. One of them is the cell, the egg cell, and the other ones will be fertilized later to produce the endosperm. So this is a bee, I believe, or a wasp. I can't really, it's like a weird picture. But this is all those, look at all that pollen. That's all pollen on an insect. And so literally, that's why these murder hornets in the U.S. is such an issue, because bees pollinate I think 70-something% of flowering plants in America. Like, we have to protect bees. Bees are necessary for our survival and for the ecosystem survival. So pollination, there's a better picture of bee right there. But pollination can literally be done many different ways. By wind, as you can see, the slender meadow foxtail, or by animals like insects. So the male gametophyte, again, you've seen pollen, most of us are allergic to some sort of pollen. Male gametophyte is contained in a pollen grain, carried to the female reproductive structure by wind or animals. The transfer of the pollen from the male reproductive structure to the female reproductive structure is called pollination. So pollination and fertilization are not the same thing. Pollination precedes fertilization. Fertilization is when a pollen grain lands on a stigma and grows something called a pollen tube. This is from your book. One of the pollen grain's 2 cells, the generative cell, divides and forms 2 sperm cells. So there you go. There's the male sex cell, gamete. The pollen tube grows into the style, where it eventually reaches the ovary and enters the ovule. And this is what's amazing about angiosperms. There's something called double fertilization. One fertilization happens, egg and sperm. The other fertilization fuses with two polar nuclei in the embryo sac to form a triploid cell, so 3 copies of the chromosome number, and this is going to develop into the endosperm, which nourishes the seedling as it grows. If you eat seeds, this is why you eat them, to eat the endosperm. The process of fertilization is distinct. 2 fertilization events happen. So let me show you a picture here. So you can see pollen grains, pollen tubes grow down. That's a very complicated process that we're not going to get into in introductory biology. Fertilization occurs. How does fertilization occur? Well, there's those 2 sperm being you know, deposited into the embryo sac, okay? One forms the zygote, one combines with the egg to form the zygote, which is a baby plant. The other produces the endosperm. That seed grows and matures, the ovary matures into a seed. And you can see the endosperm is that food for the plant. So remember, a seed is like a baby in a suitcase carrying its lunch. Protective covering, the lunch is the endosperm. Questions part 3. Why is double fertilization such an advantage for a natural selection perspective? I want you to answer that question for me. So seeds, after fertilization, the zygote within the seed grows into a tiny plant. Tough seed coat surrounds and protects it. The embryo begins to grow when conditions are right. So they're dormant, they're alive, but they're dormant. And then when conditions are right, certain proteins start, switching on, and germination occurs. And you've seen that if you've ever grown seeds in a plastic bag with a little bit of water. So here's what's cool. Apples, apple a day keeps the doctor away. They're healthy for you. Organically grown, conventionally grown, debatable. But you can watch videos about time lapse about fruit development. I encourage you to do so. It's pretty cool. But here's apple blossoms, and you can see here that the plant, those seeds that are developing, and then it's developing that fruit around it. And so animals would eat the fruit, and animals don't really they would eat all of it. we would eat around the seeds, but they would eat the seeds and then deposit the seeds later on in feces. But plants, sometimes they don't have to reproduce sexually. Sometimes they can reproduce asexually too. My family's from Plant City, the strawberry capital. I don't know if it's of the world, but it's up there. Lots of strawberry fields up out in Plant City. But sometimes vegetative reproduction, sprouting potatoes and cacti and strawberries. It's new individuals by mitosis. So these are clones. It does not require gametes, flowers, or fertilization. Your book briefly talks about grafting, but I want you to look this up for questions part 4. How does grafting actually work? I want you to look that up and tell me. It is very interesting. I'm not a grower or a farmer, and so learning about this is really interesting and cool, because I'm very I'm more on the microbiology side of life, so it's pretty cool. Fruits, I don't know if pomegranates are very healthy for you. Fruits, but here's what's cool. In everyday language, the term fruit applies to sweet plant products, but from a biology perspective, that's not the case. Beans, cucumbers, tomatoes, which we call vegetables, they contain the seeds of plants, so they are also considered fruits. Okay, so biology and common language here are not synonymous. The ovary wall surrounding fruit may be fleshy, as it is in grapes, or tough and dry, like the shell that surrounds a peanut. Okay, so the ovary wall differs between different species. So fruits come in many different shapes and sizes. Not only that, seeds are dispersed in many different ways. Sometimes they drop seeds as they eat the fruit or poop them out. Technically, the word is defecate. The wind carries the seeds, as in dandelions. Some seeds use water, like coconuts. Some seeds, if you ever had sticky grass or spurs and stuff, yeah, good grief, they hurt. But yeah, these birds right here, they stick to these sticky fruits, hitch a ride to new places, and eventually the animal will get them off, either scratch them off or through running or fighting or something. And then finally, the last thing about seeds: dormancy versus germination. So a seed's alive, it's dormant, and eventually, when conditions are right, it will start to germinate. So the growth of the embryo resumes in germination. You've done this probably with a plastic bag and baby seeds, wrap them in a moist paper towel, and you start germination. You see the primary root growing and the baby leaves and the cotyledons growing in that very simple but cool experiment. So this is our last questions for this video, questions part 5. How did the adaptations that lead to a variety of seed dispersal methods contribute to the success of angiosperms on land? How do these adaptations help them survive? Okay, so this is the end of chapter 22. My next video will cover the highlights of chapter 23, and that will be it for the year and hopefully for online learning. It's been a ride for sure, so it's been crazy. But guys, I hope you're doing well. Until we talk soon, much grace and peace and love in Christ to you and your family. God bless.